Oh my God. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Friends. Due to technical difficulties, of course, we're a little behind, but that's okay. Happens to the best of us. I'm so excited to be here, but before we begin, I'd like to remind you that the guests on our live streams reflect a diverse set of values, morals, and ethics that may not reflect the values, morals, and ethics of the Misfit Amish. Coffee with Friends may also discuss trauma of all sorts to include all types of abuse. Viewers and listeners may find it unsettling and triggering. If this live stream causes you distress, please cease listening until you're able to listen again. You may also seek support from your trusted folks and qualified mental health professionals as needed. Welcome, and welcome, Kristen. Thank you for coming back. How are you tonight?
I am really excited to be here and thanks for having me back. I will come back as many times as you want to let me. I really, I'm happy to be here. And I'm just going to dive right in if that's okay. Um,
That's absolutely okay.
let's do it. All right. So, um, at Mary's suggestion, and a very good one, I'm going to start with kind of sharing a story. This is from right now. I have been diagnosed with two autoimmune diseases, so lupus, SLE, and Sjogren's. I also was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is a pain, um, and that's different. It's more neurologic. And I was also diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. I won't give you a whole, one day I'll make my own video about all of these things, but in a nutshell, all of these things have to do with the immune system and your immune system um, overreacting in various ways. So, with mast cell, for example, I can get triggered by heat or cold, or smell, or an allergy. Um, my heart rate could go up too high, and that can lead to an allergic type response. My histamine levels go bananas. I have had three anaphylactic attacks doing nothing. That's how I was diagnosed. Was I had these happen, and the doctors were going, "Hey, what were you doing?" And I said, "Nothing. I was watching Shark Week." Um, so um, but yeah, this all these medical mysteries started happening, and why I mention this as relation to trauma is if you've ever heard the expression or read or heard of the book "The Body Keeps the Score," I am sort of the embodiment of that concept, and here's what I mean. So, trauma, definition of trauma: we experience an event or events that are either too much or too long, or sometimes both, um, you know, out of our control and happening to us. These things can be relational. Most trauma is actually relational, meaning it happens in the context of a relationship with another person or people. It can also be an event. So we've had a lot of hurricanes, natural disasters, things like that. It could be an accident. It could be combat. It could be persecution. There's all kinds of traumas that go on. But basically, what happens is our brain. So if you like look at a brain, right? Here's where we do our frontal lobe. Here's where we do all of our higher reasoning. Our empathy is connected there. Our ability to sit, ponder questions, you know, all that deeper thinking stuff. Back here in the brainstem, this is where when you hear people talk about fight or flight, well, there's also fight, flight, freeze, fawn, but all of that is back here. And what's happening is when trauma happens, we have nerves back here that go, they kind of, it reminds me of like sea anemones that kind of wiggle, like, ooh, they go, trauma, trauma. And that impacts this brain here. And attached to the brain is this cluster of its biggest nerve cluster in our body, vagus nerve. But if you imagine like roots of a tree, or like, um, pulling up like root vegetables, or, things that got really stringy, root systems, right? That's throughout our body. So when these trauma guys get going and it goes throughout our body, we are having a biological response to trauma. Okay, and again, last time we talked about science and where that comes from. These are things that we have tools to observe this is happening. So this isn't an opinion. This is like the cutting edge, and we've been piecing together all these different, and from different fields of medicine and science, that somebody over here is doing research and another person over here is doing research, and then they go, oh, wait a minute, we're both finding the same results. And then there's a connection. So going back to my medical diagnoses, those things they're finding are absolutely connected. So if we have this big set of nerves, right, going throughout our body, the expression, you get butterflies in your stomach, sweaty palms, racing heart, tension headaches,
Hmm.
um, GI distress. We'll go more into that. My tummy, I got a nervy tummy, have since I was a little kid. Um, Bedwetting, all those things. It is because our body is so, when you talk about mental health, well, you know what? Your brain is connected to your whole body. This is body health. So you are having those physical responses because your brain is connected physically to the body, is in charge of how you do things. So there's a movement actually that I really quite like, and I've been familiarizing myself with it, to start calling PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, as post traumatic stress injury. Because what actually happens from trauma is an injury to the brain. And it's way less stigmatizing to say, oh, I have a disorder, right? Like something's wrong with your brain. No, our brains are perfectly healthy. We came out perfectly beautiful and valuable and worthy the day we were born. Our brains were functioning. And to that end, what we all need, and again, this is based off of research. So, part of our research also studies, and we've done long term studies looking at impacts with children and how they're raised, relationships, success, and physical health. All of those things we have studied. And we can say by large numbers what things impact us, right? So, this isn't an opinion thing, but, and I know, and I'll speak more about this too, but some faiths, right? Like my mom was telling me just yesterday, um, about when I was 8 months old, I was like at my aunt's house, and I was an 8-month-old baby, and I'm trying to reach for something, and my aunt told my mom, you need to smack her hand, right? Because you need to be disciplining her and and breaking the will of a child, right? This is actually a common principle in many Christian-based faiths. I and it's and there's a reason for it. As much as sometimes religions want to tell you, hey, that's no, 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 that's not accurate. That's not how we practice Christianity. Well, that's not maybe how you practice it, and I'm glad, because it's actually very damaging. However, there are reasons people do these things. It didn't come from nowhere. There are things in the Bible that say, this is how you spoil a child, spare the rod, spoil the child. It came from somewhere, right? Unfortunately, what we know now is that causes something. So going back to what happens to the brain with trauma, okay? We're born having needs. What we know from research is all of us have the need to be unconditionally and positively regarded. Unconditional, positive regard. What that means is no matter what we're doing, like mistakes we make or anything like that, somebody loves us and is positive towards us. That makes our nervous system, and we've done brain scans of this to prove that makes our biological nervous system safe. We feel good. Does that make sense so far?
Well, it's actually that thing that you were talking about, the spare the rod, spoil the child.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to understand that this is almost universally used. And the way that verse goes is, he that spareth his rod hateth his son. He that
Mm-hmm.
loveth him chasteneth him betimes. And it's from Proverbs 13:24, but that's in the King James Version. And
Yes.
so then when you start talking about what children need,
Mm-hmm.
that
So,
makes complete sense. Children do not need to be hit.
absolutely. So, and we've done research. Um, I get a lot of, um, and it makes sense. Nobody wants to say, oh my gosh, my parent who loves me, who hit me, was abusing me if they didn't feel that, right? But, and I'm simply arguing the research. The research says laying your hands on a child does impact them, okay? And of course, there's going to be things that, um, for the legal sake, fall outside of the law, right? So in California, for example, I'm a mandated reporter, and I've made unfortunately, lots of abuse reports. And, I'm mandated to report if somebody uses an object, if they leave a mark, if it's in a face, right? There's different, like, m- m- things that go on, but we always, always are trying to counsel, is there another way to parent? Is there another way to teach a child? And there absolutely are better ways. So you're born with the need for unconditional positive regard. Okay, when we have a traumatic event, it's something outside of our control that is harming us, and our brain responds biologically, right? And it causes symptoms, right? We can freeze, we can, you know, want to fight, we can, and we can talk kind of throughout my story what different symptoms kind of look like in trauma. But it is that injury to the brain. And so recently I went into another medical specialist appointment, and my cortisol levels were a little high. Cortisol is a chemical going on in your body that is stress hormone, basically, and it can cause all kinds of havoc. And so the doctor is talking to me about, well, Kristen, you seem to be in this big loop. Like, you've got all these issues going on, but the big things that are impacting you and keeping you kind of in this cycle of the issues you have going on, things that would help pull you out of there if you had good sleep and pain management. Um, and so she's talking to me about my sleep, and, well, like, what's a baseline, right? What's normal for typical for you? And I said to her, are you familiar with the term CPTSD? And she said, no, what's that? So complex post-traumatic stress disorder or injury means that you have had ongoing trauma. So a lot of us, and Mary and I were just talking about this before, a lot of us, when we're free of whatever abusive situation we were in, we're not always free, right? Um, there can be re-triggering, re-traumatizing constantly. Somebody maybe second guessing that. Big trigger issues for me. So a lot of CSA survivors, it's being believed and being respected for that. Go for it.
I have a perfect example.
Do it.
I escaped 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This past summer, I'm having a conversation with a psychiatrist. Not mine, but a psychiatrist nonetheless, who already knew that I was born and raised Amish.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I said something about, like, the way that people operate when they have a persecution complex and then they have a confirmation bias and then they do certain things to continue to feed the
Mhm.
persecution complex because of that confirmation bias. I said, well, it doesn't matter if they're in a high control religious group or not. It doesn't matter what group they're part of. If they're operating in that manner, they're still operating in that manner. They're seeking validation of their bias so that they can continue going around the world saying, oh, I'm being persecuted, right?
Mhm.
And he looks at me and he says, well, were you raised in a high control religious group? And I said, well, yes, I was Amish. And he immediately goes into, I'm subjugated to like reduced to this conversation about butter and listening to him wax nostalgic about
You're
butter and furniture.
you're having two different conversations. Are you?
That is a repetitive,
Yes.
ongoing
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah.
People who look like me, who were raised Amish, experience this repetitively, and it
Uh-huh.
is gaslighty, it is traumatic, it is
I've I've been told
infantilizing.
I've been told as an ex-evangelical that I just didn't do Christianity correctly. I didn't understand it. I've been told, well, you never really were Christian. And apparently that's very common. I've mentioned Myth Vision podcast before. He talks about how many people who leave Christianity are told, well, you were never really Christian. It's like,
Uh-huh.
what? So, yeah, it's a very like
Mm-mm.
discounting, um, what that was like.
Minimizing,
So,
minimizing.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
They minimize your experience
mm-hmm.
and
What I had a good so again, be that believability is really important, and I've been re-triggered in all kinds of medical situations where doctors want to kind of especially if it's a male doctor, although women participate in patriarchy as well, and will say you know kind of mansplain to you your illness or what your symptoms are or if they're real or that's not bad or all of those things. And that's really been, that's a lot for my sister. Like I have to come down from that process, right? And kind of but I also want to invite y'all to your voice can shake, you can have all those like physical trauma symptoms, but when you're finding healing too, you can also find your voice. So even though I was in a doctor situation at one point where I was like, this is not okay, I absolutely did all the advocating. My voice shook, my nervous system's going, I'm sweaty, and like, I called my mom after, like, scream crying, and I was like, I'm angry crying, And, but you can still say your truth. And I did. And I fired that doctor right after I left his office.
oh yeah, that's
So
another thing. You're allowed to change
you
providers.
are. You
You
are.
don't
And they're
have to
not the boss of you. Guess what, everybody? This includes therapists, doctors, everyone. You are the expert of you. No, including your faith, your family. Nobody knows what it is like to be you in your body and in your life. You are the first person who's going to know what's going on, how you feel, what's happening, right? So when you find somebody who is needing to support you medically, mentally, emotionally, they need to respect you as the expert of you, right? I work with people of all kinds of faiths. I don't have a problem with faith. I really, really don't. What I have a problem with is control and abuse, and that there are a lot of religions that are based upon oppression. So that kind of leads me to some trauma and thinking about patriarchy. There are systems where you know because they're built on patriarchy, people it breeds, it grows in there. You create cultures. Like if you look at Amish, right? You're creating, it is a culture of people who believe this way generationally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that happens in high control groups, including families, right, where there's a lot of control, it is controlling the flow of information. So education, exposure to other people is limited. This happens in evangelical Christianity too. Um, and it's interesting because there are Christians who believe in evolution, for example. I was one of them. But I was told by a a young man once that I was ignorant for believing in evolution. So there's,
I'm sorry, what?
yeah, yes. Uh,
So,
Literally, he told me he's in college, and and I called him out a little bit, and he was being, trying to use his authority, being male in the church, to tell me why biblically I'm wrong. And I said, you know what? What if I am wrong, right? Is that the center of your gospel? Dinosaurs? That's an evolution? That's the hill you want to die on. Is that the hill your Jesus died on, right? Um, but even so, if we can disagree on different things. The point is we empower and embolden people, and in this case men, to think that they are better than other people, women, other genders, right? To think I am male, therefore I am better. A little more research.
well,
Yeah.
real quick, doesn't it, when people use this, like either in complementarianism or they use like the umbrella of authority, like those things teach men that they're entitled to things that are violating other people's bodily autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
and it harms everybody.
Yes. And it's a thing I say often, patriarchy hurts everyone, right? So I I have my bachelor's in feminist studies. It was called women's studies before that. But anyway, looking at gender, and I can tell you from so many points of view that the way whoever we is, whether you're Amish, whether you're evangelical or Mormon or Hindu, um,
Or Jehovah's Witness, or
we can go on.
Baptist,
We can
or
go
Methodist,
on and
or
on. You know what? Let's go back in history too, right? There used to be a lot more worshiping of. So let me rewind. Sorry, I'll confuse y'all. Um, Gender, when we think of male, female, that is a construct. Construct means we built it, we made it up. That really blows people's mind and upsets them. Um, However, think about this. Yes, you were born with biology. Let me blow your mind again. You can be born without you with different biology than male or female. So when a baby is growing, right, their fetus is growing inside the uterus, there's hormones that happen in a biological process that starts making the or sexual organs, right? And sometimes you end up with what we call intersex, right, where some of those may not, may have a few different parts, things like that. Those are real people, right? Who deserve and still get to live and exist and have authentic, real human experiences. There's cool research coming out about when we're thinking about gender, trans, gender queer, gender fluid, non binary. Those are all just definitions. Guess what? We make up those definitions too to try to identify one's experience. Labels help us give us, and some people don't like them, and you get to choose whatever you like because we take that on for ourselves. But it is because we are feeling something authentic, something is actually happening. And they've done cool brain scans where they can say, hey, this the people who have been identifying themselves as trans do have a spot in the brain that all lights up the same. Have you ever heard that, Mary?
uh-huh.
It's pretty cool, right?
And
Like,
also, like, I just want to poke at theology for a minute.
Poke away.
Galatians 3:28. There is
Uh-huh.
neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Hmm.
All I'm saying,
Yeah.
think about it. And then also, I have a question for the people who think that biology isn't, complex and there's only XXY or whatever compositions they've decided of like
Hmm.
gender. Okay. I have a question for you. So when God says that he made everybody in his own image and light, are you saying that he didn't make intersex people?
Right. How'd they get here?
Or like let's also ask about like if Eve was made out of Adam's rib, where were her female chromosomes? I think that's the right one.
When I was a kid and I would hear that story, the way my brain works, I couldn't stop thinking about, ooh, I'm delicious because I love ribs. I
Okay.
grew I grew up eating barbecue, and so I was like, ooh, that's where my brain went
And
as a
then
kid every time. I'm
please
delicious.
please tell me what chromosomal makeup that Jesus had if he existed.
Right, right,
I want to know. Like, I have questions. I'm asking for a friend. But, anyways, yeah,
right.
I did
And
have to poke at that.
the other thing, we're talking about science and all these things. What's really helpful, and high control groups, as I was saying before, control the flow of information. They also keep you very, very busy, so you don't question, you don't go looking. I mean, I was going to church all the time, right? You do your youth group thing, you do, the actual big church service. You might be in healing ministry like I was. You're also, yeah, Jesus was male. So we think.
Okay, but was it XXY chromosomes? Like, what were his chromosomes?
Hmm, did anyone peek? I don't know. I
I
wasn't
have
there.
questions about this. I
Uh-huh.
want to know.
And even if Jesus was male, I'm not.
Where did that come from?
Hmm. So again, look back in history too. Um, my point about how we've all built gender, we haven't done it the same all the way around the world and throughout history, right? So there's a time, and where in different cultures, like around the British Isles, pre-Christianity, where feminine was actually worshipped, right? We celebrated fertility and women. A maypole is not a maypole is was a religious female divine oriented thing. If you look at, and I studied this in college, it was blew my mind. They call it the genocide of women, Holocaust of women, because of this in the Spanish Inquisition, how many women were burned as witches, right? We Salem, all of the like we. Oh yeah, okay, that happened, right? But really, what it was about was suppressing women as being powerful, right? As Christianity started to rise and it was patriarchal, anything that didn't look patriarchal, we gotta get rid of that. Gotta get rid of that. So, uh, folks like midwives and healers, women who had knowledge and provided for their family. Gender is not a big deal. You know what? I'm gonna address that really quickly.
Thank you.
There are many, many people who are attempting, want to attempt, and complete suicide because gender matters to them. It doesn't need to matter to you. If it doesn't matter to you, it means you have something called privilege. If an issue isn't a big deal to you, if race isn't a big deal to you, if your gender's not a big deal to you, you're probably not experiencing the oppression that somebody else is. You probably weren't dragged behind a truck. You probably weren't, told that you're an abomination. You probably weren't kicked out of your house for being who you are.
You probably
You
weren't denied housing when you were
right.
unhoused because
Hmm. You probably had a better time getting a job, you had a better time in your community. I mean, I could go on and on, but the research absolutely supports that LGBTQIA youth are way more likely to harm themselves, to be homeless, unhoused, not have family, and die. This is killing people. So when you
Uh,
say it doesn't matter, I'm going to every time say, do you care about somebody's life?
Isn't it? Didn't the Trevor Project put out research
Hmm.
data that
Yeah.
says it's
Oh,
about
there's
47%?
oh yeah.
So,
And
I mean,
those numbers are real and there, but when you say it's not a big deal, it means it's not a big deal to you. It's somebody else's very real lived experience. And I can tell you, even though I'm, cis, identify as female, in my body, and in my story, which I mean, I guess we could get to at some point,
we did say
I
we were going to
I
talk about
was
this at
made
some
to
point
feel and was treated like I was less than.
because of your gender.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, didn't you just
Cousins.
talk about this um, man who decided to tell you about yourself for
Sorry, what?
this man who decided to tell you about yourself? I think you just talked about that. Like, that's part of that's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why gender
Mansplaining.
matters.
Yeah.
Because mansplaining is a very real thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Yeah.
saying this
Oh,
because I
here's a
don't think
funny
that
little
men are
example.
less than. I'm saying this because we have to actually address the fact that often
Hmm.
when men have grown up with this privilege, they have these ideas about expectations. And when somebody doesn't comply with their demands, or doesn't give them the energy they feel they are owed because of their gender, they will turn around and become vile. They will harass, they will threaten, they will turn to violence.
Hmm.
So, if you're a woman in this world today, even in dominant culture America,
Hmm.
gender should matter to you at some point.
Here's the other thing. Here's what empathy is. It doesn't have to happen to you for you to be compassionate and care about somebody else. If my neighbor isn't as free as I am, or I'm not as free as them, I think we should care about each other. And you know what? Even in let's bring in religion again. I don't have to agree with you or have the same faith, but I want you and I want people, if they want to be Amish or evangelical, I want them to do what feels right to them. But I think what's useful is making informed choices, right? Having education and freedom and body autonomy and safety to make your own choices.
And access to information helps exponentially with that.
Yeah. And you know what? There are, and because they'll say, and a lot of times they fear the information because you may decide, oh, wait a minute, that's not jiving with, this religious worldview. There are plenty of educated people who are still faithful. My mom is, right?
Well, and I would also say that when you want genuine societal change, like I don't advocate for people to leave the Amish. What I advocate for is access to resources and information, and it's specifically around abuse. Because I
Yeah.
believe that regardless of the fact if whether or not
Hmm.
somebody is an Amish child or not an Amish child, regardless, children deserve safety and connection. And to get there, we have to have a more comprehensive overview of what trauma really actually is and what are some of the things and some of the ways that trauma affects the body, which is why this conversation is so vital.
Yes. So we'll go back into my story a little bit here. So the court ordered, literally that moment, hey. today you get to go pick up your daughters from school, so that mom can't even talk to them and prepare them. So I am, holy crap, how old am I? I'm in fourth grade. No, yeah, I can't, no, not fourth grade. Guys, this is one of the trauma impacts, is your memory goes a little bit. And I don't mean, hey, we made that up because our memory is
No,
whatever. No, that it's their
no,
genuine
it's
memory,
literally
but
like this.
timelines get confused. So
It's
one of the
literally,
mm-hmm,
I want to, if I may, I want to
yeah,
give you an
mm-hmm,
example of that. Like one of the things that happens with trauma is it makes it so that some of the memories that you have,
mm-hmm,
they're a little like time wise, you can't necessarily pick a certain place.
mm-hmm.
And it's part of what makes it difficult to do research in a way that academia likes to receive information
Or the
because for
law, right? Like limits,
yes,
time limits on when you can prosecute, right? So this thing that's
legislation.
happening is disassociation, right? When we are trying to survive something awful in that moment, and some people describe it as like their body floating away, but your brain is trying to protect itself by shutting down.
Hmm.
And so sometimes, and there are literally things that I still to this day don't remember. But one of the outcomes of that is sometimes your timelines get a little fuzzy, and I'll have to think. I was literally just thinking in my mind now, wait, what school was it that what I was at that he picked me up? No, that couldn't have been fourth grade because that was that school. And I'm remembering the details of like, okay, I remember it was that school because he had this weird, he I remember, so one of the things abusers do is they charm the pants off of everybody around them. They make them think, they're such a great guy. My abuser, my father, would get all the teachers and people to like him, the social workers, and charm them so that they couldn't ever really believe this guy doesn't hurt his kids. He's such a good guy. No. So that's another thing to help people understand when they're like interviewing and they're trying to see, what's going on here. Look for the snake in the grass. Look at the person who's being very slick, very charming. It's not always smart and a good person, it's somebody who's being very slick, right?
Hmm.
And manipulating. You're being manipulated right now.
Well, I always say this: abusers are manipulators, and they don't just manipulate
Master
their
manipulator.
victims,
Mm-hmm.
they manipulate everybody around them.
Mm-hmm. Law enforcement, social workers, it doesn't matter who they're engaging with, right? So anyway, imagine me, this little girl shows up at my school. I literally felt my stomach like drop. And one of the things my mom had always taught me is like nobody should be picking us up. She was trying to give us some safety, right? You don't go in anybody's car unless you've had my permission, that sort of thing. But here I am, and it's like, okay, this is happening. At the same time, too, it's not, and this is what people have to understand, especially with familial abuse, is there's this push and pull constantly where I want to love the man that is my father. I want him. I have a need. Remember, we all really do
Children,
have a need for unconditional positive regard. I want him to be my dad, my protector, my friend, right? Um,
you
and
want him
so
to be safe for you.
there's tons of research that talks about kids being very forgiving of their abusers because they badly want that connection. I worked with a little boy once who he was 6 years old, and he was telling me about how his mom burned him to punish him. Would put his hand in a pan, and I'm looking at him, and I said, I was telling him that that's not ever, ever okay. Not for anybody to do that. And he said, but that's okay because mommy put medicine on it and put a band aid on me, so she loves me. And I said, love, the way we need to show love is that we don't hurt anybody in the first place, right? But this boy was so willing. And that's like a tip of the like iceberg with the abuse he suffered,
Hmm.
right? But that's his example of why it's okay, right? Not okay, not okay, right? So we really want that. So I'm here totally my if you can imagine me as a little girl being whoa, like push pull, and the manipulation that we're talking about too was also an emotional manipulation. He was constantly trying to make my sister and I feel guilty and shame and bad and sorry for him, and your mother is persecuting me and to keeping us from being apart. He would constantly tell me stories about, there was one that was really traumatic. He and I remembered this one of my early memories. So I was probably about 4, and I remember like little kids do. My mom called me. She said like you had you were spirited. My mom called me spirited. Some people call their children willful, or my mom said you were.
Disobedient,
My mom said
wild.
you were spirited, right?
Okay.
By the way, so is my daughter. Oh my goodness. So
Spirited,
yeah.
rebellious. Were you rebellious? Did you have a Jezebel spirit?
Oh,
Were
I
you
did. I
Jezebel?
did. Wait till you get to my teen years, man. Um,
Oh my.
and it wasn't even that bad, right? But anyway, no. So this little girl, I come out of the pool and I'm wearing floaties. Like back in the day, you had those plastic things you blow up and you put on your arms. They help you not sink. That's what we wore. So I am feeling super confident. I've always loved water. I'm in the pool and I'm like, I know how to swim. This is easy peasy. I don't need these baby floaties. I'm like 4 years old. I get out of the pool, rip the floaties off, and I jump in the deep end. And I remember the like, oh shit moment where I'm going down in the pool going, I can't swim. I can't swim. And I'm laughing now, but I had like
Oh my
terror
God.
because I literally just sank like a rock. I was apparently not a very buoyant child. And the next memory I have is my father, because he was like, he, he was an alcoholic too, so that breaks a lot of blood vessels in your body. So he's like kind of a red dude, and he's wearing this gold chain because it's like 1980 something, and he jumps in the pool after me to get me up. So I remembered that part of it, right? And then kind of coughing up pool water, right? So I remembered that part. So I asked him because I'm like, okay, Dad, I haven't seen you for a while. Because remember, he was MIA for a while, didn't want anything to do with us, and he got a girlfriend. And 2 years later, he suddenly remembered he's a dad and like maybe give that a try. And so
Fair weather dad?
yeah, and I'm trying to reconnect with him. So I'm telling him, hey, do you remember this story? And he manipulates this story and starts telling me, your mom had all of her clothes on and was talking with her girlfriends and ignoring you. Um, and she didn't want to jump in the pool to save you because she would get all wet. So she was neglecting me, not paying attention, and her getting wet was more important than saving me. So she was going to let me drown, and I'm the one that saved you. I was devastated, and I went back to my mom's house after that visit, and I was screaming at my mom. By the way, kids will act out sometimes with the parent they feel safest with. So a lot of times when I get like a parent in there, they're like, "Why is this kid like I'm the one who keeps them safe and like tries to provide the stability?" And I said, "Yeah, they're letting all of that out where it's safest." So anyway,
Congratulations.
sorry you're about to get pooped on because it's not
Yep.
fair. But
I do want to say hi, Jennifer. And Norel says abuse destroys you in so many ways you don't even realize. The way we go on about life shows the hurt in our actions, but we don't always see it because of all the manipulation we have been through.
mm-hmm,
When things are specifically pointed out from another's perspective, then we can see, oh yeah, that's what's happening, or that's
Yeah.
what happened.
This is why we're doing this, right?
This is exactly why we're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. And why we do it, for me, is really important cross culturally. And I don't just mean like the US is one culture. We're not a monolithic culture. Mary and I had very different and also very similar
Right.
backgrounds. So that's why it's
Yeah.
important to do this cross culturally.
Well, then cross culturally, there's also the language thing. Like you were
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about what you were called. You were called a spirited child.
Yeah.
I was disobedient and rebellious.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We have to understand the language that is used across cultures and what it means
Hmm.
and how it's used. We have to understand that
And by
too.
the way, that was not my mom's upbringing to use that. That came from her loving instincts. And it's interesting, a lot of times, what gets people to realize, wait, I'm being abused and that's not okay, is when they see it happen to their kids.
Uh
Doesn't
huh.
always. My mom's mom totally failed to protect her, right? However, my mom saw things happening to us and said, oh no, that's abuse. I need to not have this for myself. I need to not have this for my kids. And we need to seek safety, right?
I
Um,
just I just need to point something out.
do it.
Oftentimes, people in society tend to respond to experiences like the ones that Kristen had or the ones that I had. When we speak openly and authentically about those experiences, people love to tell us, well, your parent was also a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to invite you to understand that even though our parents might have been victims themselves of crimes, either as children or adults, they were also our parents. We did
Yes.
not ask to be born to them. And parents have a responsibility. What are parents responsible for? Isn't part of that providing a safe environment and fostering a nurturing environment for their children to grow
That's
and
parenting
thrive?
101. First day. Yeah. Um, I always say more than one thing, even if they're opposites, can be true at the same time.
That is true.
You can have a parent who is abused and an abuser,
Mm-hmm.
a parent who was being abused and neglectful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dismissive, harmful, abusive in a different way, abusive in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, so,
So
anyway,
maybe we shouldn't tell victims of abuse that their parents did the best they could. Maybe we shouldn't
mm-hmm,
do that anymore. This
mm-hmm,
is a call in. I invite you all to
mm-hmm,
just maybe stop doing that. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. So, in the manipulation that would go on, right? I'm yelling at my mom and all of that. And um, she would say, well, and a lot of times I get questions from parents who are, maybe they're parenting two households, there's a separation, and the other parent is saying all negative stuff. Well, how do I respond to that, right? Also, my mom was court ordered not to say anything negative. Now, did my abuser follow that rule? Absolutely not, right? But my mom, and this again, this is where gender matters. My mom would be the one that would be punished in the court, not my father, for any sort of infraction. But my mom would say to me, and this is advice I give parents now. My mom would say to me, "Well, what do you think? Do you think that do you know me to not love you and to not want to save you? Maybe your dad remembers it a different way. I don't know why he's telling you that." Because I don't know for certain. I don't know why for certain, but I can tell you what I remember. And I remember that your father was standing watering the plants that are right next to that pool, and I took off running in your direction and screamed for him to jump in the water because he was right there, and that's what happened. And by the time you were out of the water, you were in my arms. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
and you were safe here, right? I also remembered another time I almost drowned.
Oh my goodness.
I gotta, yeah,
It was
I
a
was
treacherous
sitting on the edge of
childhood.
the pool and went whoop, and she goes, "Yeah, do you remember Anna Maria? She totally saved you." I can swim now, y'all. I was on swim team. Um,
Oh, good for you. I'm glad you learned how to swim.
so,
Uh,
anyway, so my stepmother, my father's girlfriend, started, and high control religion does this too, but groups, they'll rename people. Like you have a Christian name. Mormons give people rename them that only your patriarchal holder, your spouse, right, your male spouse, like pulls you through the veil. You can look up all that theology, but they give you another name, right? Um,
your
so
temple name?
yes, yes, right. When you do your endowment and they give you a temple name, and don't forget it, but you can't tell anybody except your patriarchal holder, right? Your husband, because that's how he's going to pull you into heaven. Um, anyway, we're talking about renaming. Okay, happens a lot. And so she actually changed. I'm Kristen. I've always been that, with the exception when I was really little, my sister couldn't say my name, so she called me Kiki. Um, and I called her Coco because I couldn't, say,
Hmm.
like, we couldn't say our names. So anyway, but she started calling me Chrissy. I've never gone by that my whole life until she started calling me that. And suddenly, there is this, and again, it's a manipulation. I need to tell everybody that that is my name now. And so I do that, I comply. And there are still, um, I was really close with some of the folks that I went to later on elementary, middle school with. And they would, I like, you find people on Facebook or whatever, and they're like, oh, Chrissy. And I go, like, that's my trauma response.
Uh,
I go, nope, I'm Kristen. Thanks for that. Sometimes I go by Chris. But yeah, and so my sister also got renamed. Instead of her name being spelled with a C, it was spelled with a K, because my father's girlfriend spelled her name with a K, and we were going to be her girls. My mom said that and I remember this because I remember it being icky, but she would kiss us, she had like big red lipstick, and she would kiss us and say, "You're not allowed to wipe the love off of you," right? And it was a way of like her marking us before we go back to our mother, to say, these are mine. Um, I did a family tree project in school, um, and by the way, I could get on a soapbox for you all teachers. Don't do family tree projects, or you need to really deconstruct how you do them. So many kids experience relational trauma. Family tree is hard. Do you know how many kids I've had in my office with problems because of the family tree project? Anyway, I was one of those kids, and I needed it. I go to my father's house for a weekend. It's due Monday, and you make the family tree, like who your parents are, all of that. Guess what? My mother was not allowed really to be on the tree. It it was like she erased my mom and all of this family that I had. Um, and my poor mom, oh my gosh, like the stuff that she was going through during this, right? Your babies are your best, like her best thing, right? And somebody's trying to take them from you. Um, my mom, it hurt her, but she also knew we were doing what we had to do for survival. Do you know what I mean? Like
hmm.
we had to be appeasing him, and if we ever kind of went, oh, you know, like question something, it would be like he would get tears. Oh, you don't understand, or oh, they're trying to keep me from you, or yeah.
Yep. I love you
So,
so much. Those are called alligator tears.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, anyway, she validated patriarchy all the time. She would talk about her own father and, their upbringing in the South and how that was all glorified, right? Um, anyway, I was being CSA'd in what we call indirect abuse. Indirect and direct abuse, by the way, exactly the same thing. You're going to have all the same symptoms, trauma symptoms. You're doing the disassociation, you're doing all the things trying to survive, right? And I'm going to really stress too another issue is like, well, did you fight back? Did you say something? Did you tell somebody? Kids don't know how to do that. Their brains are trying to keep them safe in the moment, and sometimes safe and sometimes freeze is the response your brain has, right? And it is not the responsibility of a child to understand, especially something sexual and adult going on, right, in their body. And especially if you're coming from a culture or background that puts shame on bodies, doesn't educate about bodies, tells you something is sinful, or makes you the holder of the responsibility for other people's actions. Okay. Oh,
Deb
yeah.
says that places blame on the victim. It is not the responsibility of a
Yeah.
child. That's
Yeah.
right.
And you know what? Some research absolutely points out too. So a lot of times this happens in a lot of, I know it happens in the Amish, but a lot of Christian culture too, where we think of as men as beastly, and they can't help. Oops, sorry, they can't help it. I got wild
Yeah.
with my hands. They can't control themselves, and they have these urges, and if you don't satisfy them, they'll go somewhere else. And all. Guess what? Research says that's not true. And you know what? It wasn't until I really started experiencing good men in my life to know what so this is patriarchy hurts everybody. I don't think, and this is controversial, especially for survivors, but I don't think every abuser grew up wanting to be an abuser. And a lot of times, too, especially little boys, if they've been victimized themselves, sometimes, and I'm not saying we all turn into victimizers, but there is a correlation that that does sometimes happen. And they're also, so kids try to understand what is happening to them, sometimes behaviorally, right? Where they, like we learn through play and exploration, physical doing concepts, right? Like you see kids playing school, you see kids playing with dolls, right? Or pretending to do the things adults do. When violence is happening to them, they sometimes do violence to others. They're trying to understand that, right?
Hmm.
And if they're put in a cultural or religious context that says that's okay, that's
Boys will be
normal,
boys, like
that's
Deb said.
normal, and it's
Yeah.
not your fault, or you can
If
say sorry and we're gonna forget about it, right?
or
Mm-hmm.
another one that they do,
Yeah.
sometimes I've seen in cultures is that they'll say, "Well, it's not your fault
Mm-hmm.
that you had sexual encounters with that minor," and it's like a 15-year-old or a
Mm-hmm.
16-year-old, and they will call it an affair instead of sexual violence or sexual
Mm-hmm.
abuse. This is a grown adult,
Or
and they'll
she
say it's not your fault. She
consented.
led him on. All of these
Also,
are
yeah, we could
victim
also talk
blaming
about
and
consent.
enabling
Yeah.
and reinforcing bad behavior and
Mm-hmm.
abuse.
Mm-hmm.
They're normalizing it.
And the things that actually help with rehabilitation, not reoffending, right, are the very things that aren't being done, right? Accountability, getting treatment, right? and keeping people safe. If somebody's done this, even if they're a child, they need to be monitored and kept safe, right, from other people until we figure out what's going on. Saying sorry, being shunned for a bit, um, not talking about it again. I can't tell you how many stories from all across cross religious, cross cultures where we think that, oh, it happened as a kid, right? This, or it was just a young person. Um, it's not okay. Um,
Sending somebody to a different congregation or to a different section of the group, not being
mhm.
honest about it, all of those are just parts of the environment within different cultures and different groups that continue to enable normalization of sexual violence and dismissing it.
Right. And if you teach girls that it is their responsibility to not have the gaze of men and their behaviors from that, you're teaching them I shouldn't tell somebody because I screwed up. If this happened to me, I screwed up, right? That's another reason why we don't tell, right? Then when we do tell, somebody will even tell us, well, you did screw up. And I can tell you that is not why perpetrators perpetrate that crime. That is not why. It is about power and control. It could have been any little girl. It didn't matter that it was you then. And I want to say that to anybody listening. It wasn't you. There was
Wasn't
nothing you did that brought that upon yourself. I don't even have to know the circumstances. And you know
no
what? It
child.
isn't healthy, normal in any way that any adult looks at a child like that, right? I don't care if you are horny as all get out. If you've got needs and you've got whatever, if you're looking at a child like that, there is something wrong with you, not the child. Children do not attract adults, they attract predators. Okay?
Children are not sexual.
No, no. And I, even like little things like this matter, where someone was telling me, and you can dress your own daughter how you want to dress your daughter, okay? But someone was like, talking about little crop tops and like I'm not putting that on my daughter because I don't need her belly sticking out and this and that. And I was like, do what you want with your daughter. My daughter's bluey shirt with her little belly button poking out is fine. If you look at a child, I'm not going to cover my kid because, I don't, not that she's walking around, showing everything, but you know what I mean? Like, who's sexualizing a 6-year old's little belly button?
Not only that, but like here's the thing is they're sexualizing children. And then
Mm-hmm.
when they do this thing, when
It
modesty culture comes in, when
normalizes
purity
it.
culture comes in, it normalizes it. It's all
Mm-hmm.
part of normalizing it. And then it
Yes.
also normalizes victim blaming at the same
Yes.
time. It also removes accountability from the perpetrators.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
we have got to be better about that collectively as a society. We can do better than that.
And how? So, people who do the control thing, by the way, it's not just a gender thing. Racism happens a lot too. My father was incredibly racist. Um, and what's interesting, I'm sick about that, is he would marry women, and he's married two women of color, non white backgrounds. One was half Japanese and one was Cuban. They both were passing what, they could kind of pass for white in certain circumstances, right? What we call passing, putting that in quotes. But you want to say, hey, why would a racist do that? Well, again, kind of like CSA, it's a power dynamic. How do I have power over somebody? How do I feel important as this white man doing the and things that he did to them? It's very confusing. And you know what? None of it makes sense really because it's not logical, right? We're talking about narcissism. We're talking about um, systems of oppression that feed that, right?
Mhm.
So he would tell me all kinds of racist things growing up. So my whole childhood, by the way, can be kind of categorized in this time period as very much a push and pull where I lived in two different worlds. My mom's world, where I'm living in West Los Angeles, my mom is going back to school, educating herself. The more my mom educates herself, like our world's getting bigger. That's what's a beautiful thing about education. And I don't mean just book reading, I mean experiences, travel, um,
Mhm.
looking at art, talking to people, eating food like from all over, like all of these things, right? Languages, all those things that, you know, connect us to a bigger world, right? So that's happening on the one side. And in a lot of ways, I really liked where I grew up in Los Angeles because I had the coolest experiences and access to museums. Why gender matters. Here's another story. There's I don't know if it's still there to this day. I'm sure the owner that I spoke to is certainly dead. I'll get back to that in a moment. But there was a museum in Los Angeles called the Museum of Miniatures. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I loved
I've
this
never
museum.
been to that one, but
I
it sounds interesting and like something I would love.
I know you would love it. I already do. Um, but it's crafty as all heck. And it's like all kind. Basically, it's stuff in miniatures. It is what it sounds like, right? And my mom used to have like a little fancy Victorian-y looking dollhouse with fancy furniture, and I just thought it was like really like it's decorative, but it like you know what
It's
I
just
mean?
so cute.
It's captivating. It's like small, right? You see those things on social media now where people do miniature little things. Small things are cute. And so it's this whole museum of small things. And my mom used to do things with us where we'd have special days with her, and she would just take us out one on one to do special things. So my mom and I go to this museum, and it's one of my fondest memories of just looking at all the little things with her. And we get to this room where in the middle they have it's like a circular display of all the first ladies of the United States.
Well, I don't know what happened there. Sounds like we had a technological I
Are
don't
we
know
back?
what that was.
Are we
Yeah,
back?
I guess we're back.
Okay, okay. But anyway, so I'm looking at all the first ladies in this display and I'm walking all around it. And I am in elementary school. I want to say maybe I'm a third grade. I don't know. And this older man is watching me and smiling me at me, and I'm kind of like aware of him, right? Because I'm like, I got stranger vibes from here till next Tuesday. And so he comes up to us and he says to me, would you like to be one of those women, the president's wives up there? And I said to him very quickly, no, I would rather be president. My mom was smiling from ear to ear, and this man went, oh, oh, that's very interesting. And I just go about my business. Um, and I was saying to my mom, why did he think, I didn't understand, like, why did he think I would, like, I mean, the first ladies, no offense, great first ladies we've had, right? But, like, what? I didn't understand the question. So that was my one experience, okay? At the end of the museum, like, we were in the gift shop, he hands me they had this fancy gold train with a bunch of jewels in it. It was a postcard, and he said, here you go, you can have this, because it turned out he was the owner of the museum. Here, you can have this, and hopefully you'll marry somebody rich enough to be able to give you all of these things. And I started to answer him back, and I went, ah! And my mom goes, thank you, okay. And she goes, you know what, some people just aren't gonna, he's not gonna get it, but you can make your own money and marry who you want. So that's one experience. My other experience, so growing up, when my mom moved she moved us to Santa Monica, um, when we left my father's house, like, after the divorce. And my mom went to LA public schools, and some of them can be pretty darn rough. So she was like worried about putting us in that. Um, and my mom, so she put us in a private school called a Montessori school. I get in a lot of trouble with people when I say I have had bad experiences with Montessori schools. If you had a great one, great. I am explaining and owning my experience. And my experience at this school was, so Montessori, the theory of it, is kids learn by, like, they're led to, they choose and do a lot of their own learning. So we had like stations where you get to go and explore and do stuff. Well, it gives a lot of freedom. Now remember, I'm the spirited kid. So when you get to have choice, and in my life being abused, I didn't have a lot of choice. So when someone gave me choice, I ran with that choice. What did I want to do? I wanted to read, and I wanted to do art. And so I was really good at coloring. I read a lot of stories. That actually did educationally did help me out later in life, but I read a lot of stories. But yeah, learning my times tables, not so much, right? Learning, cursive, spelling, I had no structure too. We didn't have grades, didn't have homework, so um, we ended up moving, and my mom and the district that we were in was now a really good competitive even school district, public school. And I my first day of fourth grade, and again in the middle of the year, so super awkward, right? I'm sitting down and I'm like, we're all sitting at desks. This is already weird. Like, we don't have floor mats and stuff. And I'm sitting there, and we have workbooks, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I start writing, and the boy next to me says, we have to write in cursive. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to write in cursive. And I felt so, like, I felt crummy. And all the kids were doing long division. I didn't know times tables. I didn't even have a concept of a times table. I didn't know what that meant. So I got all of this testing, and this is like the 90s, so it's like, they do a lot better now. But I got all this testing done to see, does she have special needs? Is she like, what does she know? Because I'm like really not up to par, clearly. And they did do all this testing. Apparently, I was smart, but I was 2 grade levels behind where I needed to be. Um, Now, do I blame anybody for this? No, it does me no good to blame at this point in my life. Should I have probably been held back a year? That would have been helpful, especially because I didn't know any of the kids, and I'm already young for my grade level. Like, I graduated at 17, right? October baby. So I struggled for years in school, being really behind. I had to work with a tutor for a couple hours after school to do my homework, but then also do lessons of things that I missed, right? And if you've ever been somebody, and I think people probably coming from Amish can relate to, where you're educationally behind, like you miss some of those like core subjects and stuff, it is really hard on your poor little ego. You feel like, why don't I understand this? The whole world is ahead of me and I'm behind. So that's already happening, and my mom is doing her utmost to be like, nope, it's not you. We're going to keep going. But it is hard and draining when other kids could kind of veg out in the TV and stuff when they come home. I'm like working with a tutor. All of my summers for years were spent summer school plus a private tutor, and my mom sunk so much resource into this. But what ended up happening is my abuser took this as a really awesome manipulation opportunity and would call me stupid, literally, all the time, and tell me, he would make jokes all the time about my little brain. And he would tell me it's a good thing you're pretty because a man will come along and take care of you. That you don't need to think too much. You're just there to be pretty. Um, when I would do my homework, so homework was a struggle for me. And at my mom's house, I had tutors, I had my mom, I had people help me, right? And explain
Mm-hmm.
stuff to me because it was hard for me. Again, I'm 2 years grade level behind. I would come over to his house Friday on the weekend and I would be struggling. I would be put alone ish. So he'd put me in the dining room and everybody, you could hear everybody's having a great time playing and doing whatever in the room adjacent, but I would be left alone and trying to figure it out myself. He'd periodically come in and be like, "Are you done yet? Why aren't you done yet?" Then he'd stand over my shoulder and say, "Why don't you know how to do this? Is your little brain having a hard time? You don't know how to read that? Well, it's because you know, and then, you would usually find a way to blame my mom, right? And my sister, and again, I don't blame my sister. A lot of times abusers will, um, abuse thrives in isolation. Abusers know that when we have support, we can find strength in numbers. We see the abuse in somebody else and it becomes intolerable. And so that's when we challenge. So they thrive in this isolation. And a lot of times they get other people to do, other family members, other kids to do their bidding, right? And so I don't blame my sister for this, and because she needed to survive too. But my sister, so she didn't, because she was younger, she was 2 grade levels behind me when we moved school. Her Montessori experience wasn't as impactful. Also, my sister wasn't as spirited in the ways that I was. So she was very compliant. My sister was really good at being compliant and like, hey, you should do all these things. She'd go, okay, right? And she'd do the things, right? So when she started in public school, she was pretty much hit the ground running. And so she'd do her homework and be done. And she would go, I'm done. And really, like, and it was like, well, your sister's done. Why aren't you done? Right. Um, and so I also, I started doing things like, oh, I don't have any homework. Then I get in trouble at school. Right. Or I remember a project that I did, I didn't have any help, and it was so craptastic. Like you could see my kid effort, right? But it was not a cute, good I had no supplies, right? Nobody helped me. And I turned it in, and I felt so ashamed of this. And thankfully, my mom really worked collaboratively with my teacher. And so my teacher ended up giving me extra time and took the project home. One of the most empowering things my mom did was she said, honey, you did this beautiful art. Your project is beautiful. Let's use what you did. So we cut out the pictures that I did, and she helped me with like the spelling and doing that part of the project. But she said, we're going to use what you did because what you did was beautiful, right? Um,
Oh,
yeah. So that's what I mean by how this push and pull. And I think a lot of parents too, when they go, what do I do? I'm trying to fight for my kid. I'm trying to do something. Even in really bad circumstances, if you have somebody in your corner who even if the court, the world, whoever it is, nobody's believing you, nobody's giving you um, the recognition you deserve, you will feel that and keep that in your heart always. And I always say, your adult children know what that is and they can come back to you. My mom my mom is my every parent. My mom is the parent that I recommend to friends. So, I'm queer identified, and when people need love and they didn't have that parent, I'm all, here's my mom. She'll hug you, she'll love you. She's that person to me, right?
It's like one of those things, one of the most vital parts of like being a parent is letting your child know, having that connection, having that communication, having that support of physically your one, letting your child know you're in their corner, and two, backing it up with actions.
Yeah, yeah, those actions were meant everything. Um, I did a project in school, just going back to the racism, a Father's Day project where we were making cards that looked like neckties, the little ties you know,
Hmm.
and like you needed to decorate it with, the suggestions were like, what's your dad into, right? If they like sports or they whatever, like decorate it with that. Um, much to my shame today, I decorated that tie as a Confederate flag, because that's what I was taught by him and what he loved, and wrote to my Confederate father and blah blah. I love you. Happy Father's Day. And it got hung up in my classroom. Now this is in the 90s. I really hope somewhere we're doing better. And I want to just say to teachers, be that person that calls that out. If you see it, you don't need to be aggressive. I was a fifth grade little girl who did not understand what that was, right? Um, but I'm embarrassed now that it hung there, that I had African American classmates in that class who had to look at what I made and think that that was normal, good art to hang up there. Um, I would have, I think it would have been an important conversation, right? Also, if you go, well, that's my father, shouldn't that ring some alarm bells for you a little bit? Like, well, here we are in, West LA, and this kid's drawing a Confederate flag. What is going on, right?
And
Maybe
it's for their father.
hmm Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't. That's what I was told. What I was raised with. They were. That I would be told you should check DNA of the man you're going to marry because you don't know if black is in their genetic makeup, um, which is wild. My older sister and
I'm
then.
sorry. Hold up.
hmm
You should check the DNA of the person you're going to marry
Yeah,
because you don't know.
they could be hiding blackness, and you could have a black child, and that would be the worst. Yep, it's pretty awful. Pretty awful. All kinds of anti Semitic things he would say. I grew up in a community um, where actually Christianity was, um, Christianity was more rare. So I had a ton of Jewish friends, okay, and uh, Judaism actually from all around the world. There was a huge population of they identified themselves as Persian from Iran. A lot of people left from the revolution, um, and who are Jewish. And I had a lot of Muslim friends.
Hmm.
Had a couple of Buddhist friends. And then it was funny because like the Christian friends I had were actually Korean, who had like went to Korean church, right? Because that's also a thing with missionary sponsoring immigration due to war, all that. Anyway, but like I had this really kind of rich exposure. So on the that end of things, I knew, and when I tell people, I have seen people who very much believe in their faith just as strongly as you do. So when you tell me, well, I know it's true, I'm moved by this, I want I think there needs to be awareness that other people have that exact same feeling. And you saying that's not true, only I can feel that. Like, do you want somebody to tell you, hey, that's not true? You're not feeling it the way I'm feeling it, right? Interesting. But so I had,
Yeah.
um, and I joke that, so I had a best friend who was Jewish when I was a kid. Um, hmm
So JC said it is possible
Yes,
to
I
have
needed the
cultural exposure but historical ignorance.
I needed the history to be explained, and I mean not by watching Gone with the Wind, which we did all the time. That's not going to teach you anything useful. That's not a history lesson.
I have thoughts about that, but
Go for it.
I'm a refrain.
Okay, maybe I
I'm a
shouldn't.
refrain. I'm practicing moderacy here.
So, I anyway had a good friend. I went to all of her confirmation classes at Temple. I went to so many bat mitzvahs. Like, yeah, so I had this like Jewish adjacent sort of experience, right? So anyway, one day though, again that push and pull and me not understanding, I was in a grocery store parking lot, and with my mom, and you know, and this guy was walking across the way, and we're like waiting to go, right? It was a crowded parking lot, and he's walking, and he's being all slow, like when you're waiting, and you're like, come on, come on. And I said, "Ugh, move out of the way, stupid Jew." And and I'm saying this, I want to acknowledge and say out loud, I want to be held accountable for what I did. I was also a little girl, and I had no real idea what I was saying. My mom flipped her head around and she said, "What did you just say?" And I was like, "What?" And so we park, and I get the nice long talk about why that is not okay and why there is a whole oppressive history, right, of making Jewish people feel less than, and people killed them for that, and it is not okay, and all that. Anyway, I remember feeling guilt and shame and sadness, and she reminds me of my Jewish friends, right, and how they would feel. And she's like, "Where did you hear that?" And of course, she knows where I've heard that. And she said, "Well, that's not something we're going to grow up to be." Ugh, right? So I constantly felt like I had to be two different people almost, right? And it's called code switching. And we do that normally, and it's not always a bad thing, right? Like we talk to our professor differently than we're going to talk to our friends, right? We're going to talk to our clients differently than we talk to our spouse or partner. Sometimes I talk to my dogs and my kids the same, or I mix up their names, but just generally,
Well,
do you know what I mean?
we're gonna
It's
talk to
normal.
we're going to talk
Mm-hmm.
to like different people in
Right.
different ways. Like I'm a code switch. If I'm talking to somebody that was born and raised Amish or raised Amish, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a code switch. I'm a code switch. Furthermore, like English is our second language. So of
Right.
course I'm going to code switch.
Mm-hmm.
And culturally, we're so different that I have to code switch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a normal thing.
Totally.
It's
Totally.
a very normal thing. You talk to your banker differently than your colleague at work.
What gets tricky about this in abusive situations is we do a lot of splitting. That's another thing, splitting of yourself. It's that part of a dissociation, right? Where now I'm trying to be what the abuser needs, but I'm trying to also be myself, right?
Hmm.
And that gets hard, and I had to do that a lot. And
And
so,
you're a child
mm-hmm,
and you're trying
not
to
as a
form
kid
your
even.
identity and figure out who you even are.
Right, right. And you need safety, to explore that, who you are, right? So one of the mind f's that he would do with us was so I was a big animal lover. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a veterinarian, because I loved animals. Now I had a whole bunch of allergies. I've had so much treatment since then, so I could have animals. But anyway, I learned very early on, like, actually holding a dog at a vet's office. I got to like see this dog come out of surgery, and I was like, I want to save the doggies' lives and be the surgeon. And then my arms got covered in hives, and that was like, nope, no, you're not. Anyway, but my father knew that I had this connection with animals, right? My sister too. My sister loves animals, right? We always have dogs. And so he brought a dog home once for us. My dog Snoopy, golden retriever, all lovey, lovey dog. And it's like the best thing ever. When you get a dog and you're a dog person, it's the best thing ever, right? And you're a kid, so it's like super the best thing ever. And then I go to visit and I come home one day. Where's Snoopy? Well, since you all don't live here with us, we had to send Snoopy to a family where the kids are there and could take care of Snoopy. Then they would show us a picture, like I could cry right now, show us a picture of this family with my dog. I didn't get to say goodbye, never got to visit. I don't even know this freaking family. It's not even like a friend of somebody or whatever. I never got to hear about my dog. Um, so then we had, I don't even remember who they were, but we had some friends or something that had two blue and gold macaws. They're big parrots, big
Hmm.
birds. For anybody that knows, birds are incredibly loving, especially big breeds and stuff. Really intelligent, really affectionate. And it was sort of empowering for me as a kid to be like, I could hold this big, it's got big talons, a big beak, but it, like, there's a respect there. I'm going to respect and love this creature, and it's going to do that for me, right? That's why animals and animal therapies and stuff can be really helpful, because when you show an animal that respect, they show you that respect, and it's not harmful as like an abusive relationship was. It's very, and you're borrowing their nervous system. It's really healing. So anyway, I loved these birds, and then like we were bird sitting, and they go back. And so we would go to animal expos, like exotic bird expos. Again, that probably is like a shady practice now. I don't know, like the breeding or I. So somebody will probably comment at some point and be like, "Hey, that's really horrible to animals." I don't know. I was a kid. I was dragged to this expo. Anyway, they have all these like beautiful birds all over, and people breed them and they're for sale. And we get to this one lady's booth, and I see this cockatiel that's, it's white, and it's got little pink and peachy feathers and yellow feathers mixed in, and it's like the most beautiful thing. And by the way, there are those birds, when you pet them in certain ways that are sensitive, and also pet their tongues, they're actually very soft and not wet. Their feathers fluff up, and they get all like, oh, that feels good, and they're super affectionate. It's kind of like when a cat curls on you, and or my dog will constantly dive under my hand to be pet. You know, birds are affectionate that way too. So anyway, my father let me sit with this bird in my lap for an entire day, and he said, I'm buying you this bird. This is your bird. I am in love with her. This is my bird. I've named her Sugar, by the way. And this is Sugar, and the ladies teach me. Even the lady who's was selling the bird is telling all of us how to take care of her and what things we will need for her, and enclosures and enrichment and all that stuff. And I'm taking it very seriously because I'm going to really take care of Sugar. And then it's all time to wrap up and leave. I've spent an entire day with this bird in my lap, petting and loving and all that. And he said, I can't do it. And I'm like, huh? And he said, you don't spend enough time at my house to take care of this bird. You should not have this bird. But if you did live at my house, I would buy you this bird. So, and then he wouldn't let me cry about it. And he said, I feel worse than you do, so you don't get to cry. He would do weird
Did
things, like he had us design, one of the houses we had was on the ocean in Oxnard. It had a little dock in the back, and we would take boat out and stuff, and so I learned about a lot of water things. I could swim by then. Um,
Can I just point out the
yeah,
sheer amount of manipulation and control
yeah,
over, like, not only taking your pet from you,
mm-hmm,
and it's like the pet became an object to use to manipulate you.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then he would dangle a pet in front of you in another attempt to manipulate you to bend to his will.
yeah, yeah,
And when you're a child, you may not recognize that for being manipulative. Instead,
mm-hmm.
you feel like it's your fault, right? Like,
I
didn't.
chose my mom, and it's my fault. By the way, it actually wasn't totally my fault. Like I was put where the court put me, you know?
I mean,
I was a ping pong for the court to begin with. There was a point where my parent remember, or if you've watched the other
yes,
episode, I was a ward of the court. Like I never had
yes.
any freaking say. So that I'm being punished is like next level, right?
It's like this insidious level of like, where is a child supposed to turn?
Yeah. Um, so anyway, we're by the water. He gave us pencils and paper and said, y'all should design. I don't know if you've ever seen them. I don't know. I don't know if your people probably weren't too much water faring, but little tiny sailboats. Have you ever seen those? Where like they look like little miniature sailboats, and so and a lot of times in like coastal communities you'll see kids like sailing them, like they do sailing classes and learn how to do all those stuff, and so I would see those kids doing those things, and I think in my head I wanted to be a little pirate, and so because spirited, right? um and so and so
There's
he
that good old spiritedness just
yeah, I was
getting
like,
in the way.
right? May or may not have dressed up as a pirate in a Ren fair many times before, right? Because, yeah. So he gave us pen and paper and said, design your boat, girls. And, like, what colors you want the sails to be? We'll do custom all this, and you can name it. And we drew it all up. Guess what? Okay, I'm talking to the person. We're gonna start because we had a friend who had a boat. He was a boat shop owner, and they were gonna get this done for us. Oh, he's going to get this done for us. And I'm elated. Like, yes, oh my gosh. And we get to do sailing classes, and I'm so excited. Um, and then guess what? Yeah, same story. You're not here. This would be a thing that you would do if you lived here. And the thing was, by the way, this really messes with somebody's sense of hope, somebody's sense of trust, right? How am I gonna, do you know what I mean? Like, it is hard when people say they're going to do something. Even if they forget it, I'm like, were they being malicious? Like, there was a whole process that I had to figure out, and I can still struggle with at times, right? This messes with you. Um, so, this wasn't the worst dog story. Snoopy was not the worst, unfortunately. So, my stepmother really wanted a dog actually to stay because she wanted the dog. And so she gets this dog, and the dog's staying because like she's like, this is my dog and whatever. This dog, oh my goodness. First of all, she was a Shar Pei. Have you ever seen those dogs that are like super wrinkly? Oh my gosh, adorable, right? And like, just sweet, sweet girl. This dog was black coat. Okay, really beautiful. But guess what my father, my racist father, is going to say and do with a black dog? You can imagine. All the racial slurs, the way, the tone of his voice, talking, like Uncle Tommy to the, it was awful, awful and disgusting. Um, so the dog, when we were going through it, I want to remind you, see, while all this other stuff is happening, like that's not enough. CSA is also happening. Okay. And I spoke earlier about indirect abuse. Indirect abuse, again, exact same trauma symptoms, all the same side effects as CSA, except instead of directly just like, I'm assaulting you, this is happening, boom. This is now like covert. There's like some mind effing going on about there's a reason or an explanation, right? So for him, he was a doctor, right? And I put that in quotes because, again, because I don't know that he actually went to any chiropractic school or whatever, but certainly what he was doing with me and my sister was not medical. But the things that he was doing, it was because he was examining, he was checking, he was, and other things that he would do. So uh, we were given this loofah that's like plasticky nylon. People still use them today and they do in a lot of Asian countries. It's like this exfoliating thing. And they can be really lovely if used appropriately, I'm sure. However, what my stepmother would do, and then my father, is scrub us till we were red and raw and sometimes bleeding because my mother made us filthy, um, and didn't take care of us. And they wouldn't need to do this if my mom took proper care of us. Um, so, yeah, I got soap in private parts that burned and stung. I got anal suppositories and medications that really hurt. All sorts of things that were medical, right? The other big one, um, type of abuse that I didn't even process till much later, but I remember it was he used to give us something that he called monkey blood. It was, he would take a very, those Q-tips you see at doctor's office, they're on a wooden stick, they're long and have the cotton on the end. So he would dip it in this like red orangey type substance and he would say, open your mouth, and he would swab our throat all over with it, and it was it would burn, and it was gross, and you could feel it like go in your sinuses, you could feel it dripping down your throat, so you're definitely adjusting it. Okay, and I'm gagging, and he would do that several times. Okay, so, and then the other thing he would do was he would take these bowls of mayonnaise, like just little tiny dishes. He put mayonnaise in it. And then he would take these pills, and I don't know what they were, but the little capsules where you can pull them apart and there's little balls inside? My kids like to shake them like maracas, but anyway, like he'd open up those and pour it in the mayonnaise, mix it up, and then he would make us eat it. By the way, it does not taste like a mayonnaise. After you put that crap in it, it is chemically vile and
Well,
disgusting.
and what was the content of this? Also, what medical necessity was there for any of this?
He's telling us there is. Trust me,
But
I'm your father. I know best. I am a doctor. You're sick. He would give us cough medicine all the time and medicine. Okay, to this day, it's ironic because I actually have to take a whole lot of medicines to stay alive. Thank you, medical science. But I was terrible about taking liquid. medicine. I have this like gag reflex. And now I really understand where that comes from too. It's a very much trauma response. Like when I've had to take medicine, like once I, like a year ago, I had a surgery where it was a GI surgery that I had to have like liquid diet and liquid pain medicine. My poor sweet husband, who just like has been my supporter for 20 years, like was like holding my hand because I'm like I have trauma response to that plus that gag reflex. The body keeps a score. I physically have trouble. Um, but anyway, so that's all happening. I don't know that any of that was wrong or bad, again, because it's been explained. Now, here's the thing about indirect abuse, sexual, emotional, physical, otherwise. You don't know that it's wrong, right? You're like, and you're a kid, you're trusting your parent, right? However, you still have all the crappy feelings from it. You still feel icky, dirty, shameful, wrong, physically hurt, right? You feel all of those things, even, but your mind is trying to tell you whatever. This is a perfect setup for you to welcome gaslighting in your future, right? This is what Christianity is. Oh, but this is how we behave. You go, oh, okay, that's normal, because that's been your life experience, right? So that kind of set me up for some failure later on. But anyway, I don't know that that is wrong, right, or shouldn't have happened. And I am with my mom at my pediatrician's office because I'm sick, right? My stomach hurt, and to this day, it's funny, I remember the pain, but it was one of those things that, like, I had kind of, like, your trauma brain's trying to keep you safe and healthy, and you don't need to remember everything at every moment, although sometimes that comes to bite you when you least expect it. But I kind of like put that on the shelf somewhere for a little while. And when I was talking to my mom recently about some of these memories, because I wanted to prepare for this and I had to clarify some memories, um, she was like, "Baby, do you remember how bad like you were doubled over?" And I'm thinking about, I'm like, I remember just, and I've had natural childbirth. I can tell you that the pain in my stomach was next level. I thought I was going to die. I also couldn't stop vomiting. So my mom, of course, takes me to the doctor. And the doctor's going, all right, have you been around anybody who's sick? They're taking my temperature. You don't have a fever. They're like, do you eat anything weird? How about medicine? I had just come back from my father's house. And I said, well, I take monkey blood. And he's like, I'm sorry, what? Like, what is monkey blood? And I tell him, the doctor's eyes, and I'll never forget this, he couldn't, it was like a visceral react, he couldn't control his reaction. His eyes like bugged out. And he goes, what? And I tell him, like, I don't know what it was called. And I said, my daddy's a doctor. And my mom quickly tells the doctor he practices as a chiropractor, maybe, right? And the doctor's like, okay. And so I'm describing it, and he steps out. He thinks what is happening. You can look this up, but he thinks what's happening is um, it's not so there's booger. It's I looked it up so I can remember the name of it. I could probably find it, but it's methyl dibromo something. It's people were using so he thought it was mercurochrome, which people use topically, and then we were told, oh, don't do that because you could have mercury poisoning. He thought it was that, um, and it was like, no, no, that's not what it was, because he got my father on the phone and said, what's up? Turned out, I don't know how, he was pretty smart about getting him to admit what was up. And then I was able to point to like what it was, and it wasn't the lesser. Oh, it could kind of harm you, but we're being extra careful. No, it was the thing with the mercury, the bad kind that should never be ingested. So I had mercury poisoning. Um, I still wonder to this day. I have all kinds of health problems and immune issues. I don't know what the heck was given to me, right? But I gotta say, how does that not impact your little body, right? So, the other thing was I said, well, he's like, what other medicine are you taking? What is he doing, right? Because now it's like, what's going on? I'll never forget, he pulls out this giant book. It looks like, it's like super thick. And it has pills in it, pictures of pills. And it's the pill book. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And he's having me flip through to see if I can identify what was in the mayonnaise. And I'm like, I'm sorry. One time it was colored like this, and another time it was colored like this, and so that was a dead end. And you're probably all wondering, like, did the doctor report this? Well, I wished he had, and I always tell people reporting laws are dead simple. That was reportable. The doctor told my father, don't ever do it again. Because my father made him believe, this is again the manipulation. Oh, I didn't understand. I didn't know that that's what that would do. She had a sore throat and I was trying to help her. Or he made up some bullshit, right? And so he said, okay, well, don't do it again. Otherwise, I will report you. So good news is he didn't do that again. However, right, I did continue to get medications, and I don't know if he put other things in it, you know. So when I would go to my father's house every night for years without fail, I would go to bed, fall asleep, wake up, and vomit, and sometimes more than once in the night, to the point where my father and my stepmother put a bucket next to my bed so that I could vomit and go to their room because I would still be vomiting. Their room was like on the other end of the house. And they would say the reasons why I was sick was because of what my mother fed me and my mom not taking care of me. Um, but it was just very weird. Like, and now here's the thing too. Was I probably getting some poisony some? Probably. I don't know. I'm never gonna know. The other thing with that too is your um your body does respond to trauma physically. I talked about that earlier. I still to this day, if something's really really stressful, I will have GI distress. I could vomit. I could have like all kinds of things happen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of IBS that happens with people, irritable bowel syndrome, is also trauma related. In fact, doctors now ask, so fibromyalgia, which I have, IBS, any of those things, a lot of doctors now will ask about your trauma history because those things can be directly correlated. So I am having a time. I also would have horrible like constipation
Oh,
problems. And again, that I know he was giving me stuff for and doing that. It was awful. One time, abusers don't like strength. One time when he told me, you're taking this cough medicine. It was the one cough medicine I can still, it's the Triametic, whatever, the red stuff. I called it the red stuff. I could tolerate the orange stuff, but the yellow stuff and the red stuff, like instant no go. And for whatever reason, sometimes even little kids in bad situations can find a little ounce of their sass and courage. And my spirited self said, no, I am not taking that medicine. I am not sick. That is cough medicine. You take cough medicine for a cough. I don't have a cough. And I immediately was like, I'm in trouble. And I saw him raise his fists and come at me, but he also knew that, because part of the issue, what landed me as the court's ping pong, was the fact that he had beat me as well. Like there was photographs of that, and so I think like he knew, okay, I can't do that, right? But anyway, and he's yelling back about, I'm trying to take care of you and this and that. Like he had said, because we were out boating, he didn't want me to get sick. He also used Mary Poppins in a manipulative way. I was a big Mary Poppins fan. It was my favorite movie. And they go out and she gives them medicine or vitamin something and spoonful of sugar. Anyway, not a good thing to teach kids, by the way. But he's trying to say it's like Mary Poppins, and you need to take your medicine. And I'm like, you are no Mary Poppins. And so I said, I started making all kinds of threats. I'm telling, and I listed the therapist's name, and I'm telling everybody, and this is not, I'm not taking that medicine, and I go to my room, I'm sobbing, because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen to me.
Mhm.
He comes in the room, and he starts crying, the crocodile tears. I just want to take care of you and love you. And if you say those things to people, they'll take you away and we'll never be together. Um, Did you just not like the red one? I can give you whichever one you like. So, out of a compromise, because I feel bad now I've hurt him, I took the orange stuff. Which makes me wonder, right? It wasn't about the medicine. The type of
It
medicine
was
didn't matter.
never about the medicine. It was about controlling you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How are we?
Dib asks, why did he have even have unsupervised visitation? Well,
That's
Deb,
a
that's the
good
great
question.
mystery.
Because a judge who was friends with his attorney told my mom that he was a good man, and if he wasn't before, he was now, and her children would resent her for keeping us from him, and that day he was granting us um, unsupervised visitation overnights. um, a
Yeah.
lot in our judicial system, from criminal, and the things he was doing were criminal, um, family court, dependency court, all of those places that I've been in. Um, there's a lot that is arbitrarily up to a judge, right? We need a lot more, and I get it, we need to have nuance in our legal system, but we don't apply nuance where it needs to be, right? And so anyway, we need to fix a lot of things. I could get on a
Well,
soapbox forever.
like I could literally sit here. I think we just need to keep like having more lives because we've been going for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Yeah. We just got to come back and do it
Guys,
again
we
because
haven't
like the
gotten to here. I'm gonna do the dot 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 again. Ready, Mary? So
yep.
dot dot dot. Kristen gets kidnapped by her father.
Oh my god, why are we laughing at trauma humor?
Wait, guys, this is healthy coping. I'm okay. Nobody's kidnapping me. I'm in my office. It's
We're
fine.
safe. I'm in
Yeah.
my office. We're safe.
I even have my emotional support croissant Bruno. I'm good. So, yay.
We're both
So,
good.
but yeah, Kristen gets kidnapped. I haven't even gone into how he used religion to manipulate, and um, I will always have a scary dislike for Precious Moments dolls because of that. My experiences there. I had a little pink Precious Moments Bible that he would read to us and justify his
Oof.
abuse with the Bible. Um,
Oh, that
yeah,
sounds like RTS, right? It's a real
yeah,
thing.
it's
Mm.
cringy. And then how he exits my life, and then what that did for me after, right? And how, and again, I'll say it, we said it before, Mary, when you get safety, theoretically, you're not done. you're not necessarily safe. And we'll circle, this will put a nice little ribbon on our evening. Um,
Hmm.
Circle back to when we are talking about needs. When we have unmet needs, okay, need for safety, unconditional positive regard, our brain, in a really massive effort to take care of us if we're not being taken care of, will try to get you to meet that need. Now, we also have been conditioned to say we don't deserve that need. So then we try to fill that hole. It's like, oh, I'm still hungry, right? So you go to fill it with something. That's why you see so much substance abuse, self harm behavior, toxic relationships. In so many ways, I filled it with all kinds of some different stuff. One of them was I needed a forever father that would protect and love me unconditionally, and I found Jesus. Now, Jesus can be a lovely addition to somebody's life. My experiences, especially because I had been conditioned with to accept gaslighting, to accept being less than submissive, all these kinds of things meant I had a pretty toxic experience that meant I am now reliving, re experiencing a lot of some of this abuse, and the situations that I was in, are hard. Now, Mary, it took me, and I want to say this just so people don't go, oh, Christian hater, I'm not coming back and hear what she's got to say. Not a Christian hater. Mom, I told you my mom is my favorite person. My mom is very devout. Um, so the thing is, I hesitated for years to speak about Christianity and evangelical Christianity because it is a dominant culture in the US, right? Although more and more, and this is just research, more and more people are fading out of religion, like we're dropping
Hmm.
away from churches more and more,
Hmm.
that it is still ingrained in our culture, our elections, our politics, I mean, you can see that everywhere. And right now, I just felt like, gosh, this really is a time. And YouTube and documentaries are exploding with all this, like, people love their culty content. Be careful, though. Don't be othering other people. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? Like, the voyeurist stuff, like, let's peek at the Amish. Aren't they interesting? Like, don't do that stuff. Don't be that guy. Um, but I go, you know what? Every time I'm hearing those stories and educating myself, because one of the things that I often do with my clients too, because I see clients who have religious trauma, okay, and it is a form of trauma. Um, and so I educate myself and I go, God, that sounds a lot like my experience with Christianity. God, that sounds a lot like my experience with Christianity. Gosh. And I went, okay, fine. I'm calling it out. If you want to come at me, just like folks want to do about gender or whatever. I know my mind, and I am not that little girl anymore. And by the way, when I was that little girl, she was spirited. So it's
Every
okay.
time you need
I'd
to
rather
share.
have the hard conversations, y'all. So we're gonna,
Yeah, we're gonna keep on
we're
having the
gonna,
hard conversations,
yeah. And
and
Mary's scarf will get longer and longer.
eventually it'll be done. It's almost done. It's almost done.
Wow.
We're getting there. We're getting
I'm
there.
impressed.
But I want to thank you for coming on here and thank you for sharing. Do you have any final words you might want to say?
Yes. To all of the parents, caregivers, loved ones, the people who are fighting for a child who maybe is in an abusive situation. Maybe you're in the court. Maybe you're trying to get therapists, teachers, whoever to do the right things, right? I want to say, I wish that when we said, let's get justice for this person, that it came from the top down, that the justice system would deliver that justice, okay? The reality is, it doesn't always work like that. Okay? What does work is giving ourselves justice. Being that person, you can make a decision, even if something's going to go wrong in the court or, with the doctor or somebody, you can still be that person for that child. Okay? Be that person until they can stand up and deliver their own justice, right? Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to say, well, let's stop fighting in the justice system. Absolutely not, right? Part of my justice is speaking out about this and trying to change that, okay? But I never got justice in a courtroom. Um, One of the things that I love that I get to do now is I've sat in courtrooms with clients. Actually, just about a year ago, I sat in a courtroom with a client. It was one of my proudest moments. And I didn't take a dime from this client. I do pro bono work sometimes. And I said to him, he had finished his therapy, had done over a year with me. He had actually attempted suicide, and long story, but we prevented that. I got help there in time, and I'm so glad to say he's alive and amazing today. But he stood there in his courtroom, he read his victim impact statement, and the judge came back, and his abuser is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. He will not see the light of day again.
That's actually something that gives me hope. Thank you for sharing that.
But you know what? I never got that. But the justice I got came in here, and I put that power somewhere else. And a big part of that is because somebody was in my corner and never stopped. So I want to encourage those parents, don't stop. Seek resources, even if you tell that kid, I believe you, I believe you, I believe you, I'm here. Okay?
Yep, yep. Thank you so much. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for engaging with this content. As always, you can like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you to our guests and our Patreon subscribers. This live stream was brought to you by the Misfit Amish and our Patreon subscribers. Art used in this